Hello, friends. Today, we're not doing the L1 show like we're normally doing. We're doing kind of a weird video about a piece of legislation you may have heard us talk about on the L1 show, or maybe you've just seen it all over social media. The Restrict Act.
It's the U.S. legislation, but this still applies worldwide because a bad idea spreads to everywhere. Just look at the EU.
So the problem, as it is presented to us, that this is the solution for, is TikTok. And the fact that we're pretty certain, I think they've kind of admitted, the Chinese Communist Party has visibility into TikTok. They're using it to observe what we want to see, if not seeding what they want us to see.
Yeah, absolutely. And they also have all your data, just your name, email address, all that.
Well, it's possible to select an individual that has the app installed and then see a lot of non-app data, like where they are.
So that's bad, for sure. But we need to remember that TikTok is not alone in this capability. It's literally every social media app on your phone.
Facebook, Twitter, all the Google apps.
Tumblr, if you're still doing that in this year.
Everything is harvesting your data, maybe not sharing it with the CCP.
The wrong version of Pixel Dungeon.
But it's obviously a bad thing. It's true. We should probably do something about it. I don't know exactly what that is because people are doing this voluntarily to themselves, kind of like cigarettes and alcohol, right?
Yeah, the Restrict Act is saying when we ban an application, not only should it be banned, but it should be very hard for you to find a workaround to the ban so that you can load the application yourself because you're too stupid to know better.
Well, you're getting ahead of things here. The Restrict Act is supposedly the answer to what are we going to do about TikTok and the Chinese Communist Party being in TikTok. So the government has said, hey, we've got a solution. So today we want to take a specific look at the language in that solution, being the Restrict Act, which you can go online and read, and we're going to show you some parts of it here. And I do recommend you read it. It's not that long. It's mind-numbing government speak, but you should check it out. So let's look at some highlights. And the first thing that I think we should point out is some things that do not appear in the Restrict Act.
Yeah.
The words TikTok.
Or ByteDance, which is the owner of TikTok.
Or really any specific application by name. That's good law design, right? Like they could just change TikTok to RipRap, and that would be a different thing.
This has probably been the biggest thing that I've seen online when people talk about this. This is what everyone is harping on. It's like, this is not specific enough to target TikTok.
In fact, it's not specific at all. It's not even specific to social media.
Nope.
We could say social media, and that would certainly encompass everything that you just described.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, change your name, whatever, it doesn't matter. So instead, let's start with the synopsis of the Restrict Act.
To authorize the Secretary of Commerce to review and prohibit certain transactions between persons in the United States and foreign adversaries, and for other purposes.
Other purposes?
So the Secretary of Commerce can interfere with any kind of commerce? That's very antithetical to what the Secretary of Commerce historically would do in this capitalistic society.
Yeah, and they talk about some possibilities where you might need to get involved, right? And again, it's not just about social media. They're going to give us 5 bullet points where they absolutely expect to apply this.
Information and communication technology products, critical infrastructure, digital economy, a federal election, national security.
It's a pretty broad brush.
Yeah.
Well, but let's break it down even further. This is saying that the Secretary of Commerce could solve sort of 2 problems that we've had for a while now. One is the Huawei thing. Huawei, and then eventually they did add like Hikvision and some others. You can't buy those cameras. And now to do business with the federal government, if you're a private business, while you can still buy Hikvision stuff, you can still import some of this stuff, you have to sign a thing that says, oh, we don't buy that. We don't have any of that kind of equipment. We're not deploying Huawei. And the federal government won't let you deploy Huawei equipment on. And so this would kind of let the Commerce Secretary deal with that. But again, it's insanely broad strokes, and that's nothing to do with social media, and that's already been blocked anyway. It was just a process.
Now, in terms of who does this apply to, once again, we know that the scope that's being sold to us is China, right? It's obvious that it's TikTok and China that they tell us that they need this to get a handle on. But that's definitely not what they're limiting it to. In fact, they're not really limiting it at all. Now, they do mention specific countries. Obviously, Iran's in there, Russia's in there, China's in there, but they don't stop there. And in fact, when they say that, it's like a U.S. person engaged in business with a foreign adversary, as they call it. But what is a foreign adversary?
Oh, thankfully, they did define that. Foreign adversary means any foreign government or regime determined by the Secretary, pursuant to Sections 3 and 5, to have engaged in a long-term pattern or serious instances of conduct significantly adverse to the national security of the United States or the security and safety of United States persons.
So they can apply that to pretty much anything they want.
No. Just remind me again here. If we had somebody that had been, sort of extrajudicially pursued by our spy apparatus and that was holed up in an embassy in London forever, and they decided they wanted to have a bake sale for their legal defense, or it's like, hey, buy my app on the App Store for $1 so that I can use the money for legal defense, they could be classified as a foreign adversary, right?
And that would be the national security section. So, yeah, they can do whatever they want to that person. As long as they transacted anything, and we'll take a look at more about like what transactions and as they refer to them as holdings mean later on. But yeah, you don't even have to actually buy and sell anything.
So if they were to write a book, we could just use this to take the proceeds. We wouldn't even have to do anything else in law. We
could do so much more than take the proceeds. But we're getting ahead of ourselves here. Now we're talking about the foreign adversaries. So they have listed some foreign adversaries. We know up front what some of them are. But what about, like, in the future, we might need new foreign adversaries, right? What if we go to war with France? Can we add them to the list? Well, not only can we add them to the list, but there is, it's going to be a secret. So from now on, we're not going to know.
Notice, no later than 15 days before the date on which the Secretary makes or removes a designation under subsection A, the Secretary shall, by classified communication, notify the President, pro tempore, Majority Leader, and Minority Leader of the Senate, the Speaker and Minority Leader of the House of Representatives, and the relevant committees of Congress, in writing of the intent to designate a foreign government or regime as a foreign adversary.
So that's the only people who get notified. And
not the American public. American public weirdly absent.
Or Congress.
What if I want to import from AliExpress and Jack Ma's? Come on.
Well, it says relevant committees of Congress, which is a smaller
But
group.
that's only the committees that deal with the foreign stuff, right?
Right.
So not Congress.
Not
involved.
everybody.
So this and classified communications, meaning that all they have to do, they can do it actually before they notify anybody, right? So they got 15 days to tell you after they've turned Australia into a foreign adversary. And then you, as someone who might be doing business with Australia, you're never going to find out until they decide to.
Your stuff just disappears in customs when you import it after you've already paid for it.
But the great thing about all of that is that, okay, at least as an American citizen, if I'm not doing any foreign trade, I don't have to worry about this, right?
Well,
Like, it can't really affect me. But it's interesting that the critical infrastructure and national security parts of this actually open up quite a bit of a loophole. So let's look at some bullet points of how they define all of that.
Critical infrastructure. The term critical infrastructure has the meaning given the term in Section 1016E of the USA Patriot Act.
Oh, we're bringing the Patriot Act back to define that.
Oh, what year is it? Entity. The term entity means any of the following, whether established in the United States or outside of the United States.
So an American company could easily,
yes.
or an American person could easily be a part of this.
So it mentions a firm, a government, government agency, government department, or government commission, a labor union.
A labor union?
A fraternal or social organization.
Oh, no.
A partnership, a trust.
That's us.
Yeah.
Level 1 Tax does business with external countries, and we're a partnership.
Fun times.
That's where we get our KVMs from Taiwan.
Oh, yeah. I have to jump through some hoops there sometimes when we're doing imports.
So a joint venture, a corporation, and finally, a group, subgroup, or other association or organization, whether or not organized for profit, which seems like maybe a little bit of overreach for the commerce.
Seems like you could fit almost anything inside that, right?
Yeah.
A Discord server. I don't think they called that out by name, but
Absolutely, that could fit in that. And the next section of that is like when can we apply these rules outside of the foreign adversary? What do we have to satisfy? We could just bring this against whoever we feel like.
Otherwise poses an undue or unacceptable risk to the national security of the United States or the safety of United States persons.
We decided we don't like a certain guy with white hair. We're going to make his life really terrible. And it's like, that seems awfully extrajudicial of you.
But that guy is a threat to U.S. persons.
Obviously.
So one, if you threaten one human being in the United States, this could apply to you. That's how I interpret that.
Yeah. I'm sure someone who's maybe a lawyer could probably provide a little bit more insight, but that does seem to be
But
what it's saying.
I worry that someone who's a lawyer could fit even more into that rather than
Yeah.
go the other direction, right? Because that's who's going to be trying to manipulate this.
We've certainly seen them take a pea-sized loophole and do hula hoops with it.
What you think the Disney lawyers get hold of this? It's bad news.
Pretty soon, Disney's got a military base on the moon as a result of this. I don't know how that happened.
Now they do point out like what kind of risks can we apply this to, right? And so that would be a great way to sort of rein this in and make it not at this sprawling evil thing that it is. But the way they describe it doesn't sound like that.
The Secretary, in consultation with the relevant executive department and agency heads, is authorized to and shall take action to identify, deter, disrupt, prevent, prohibit, investigate, or otherwise mitigate, including by negotiating, entering into, or imposing, and enforcing any mitigation measure to address any risk arising from any covered transaction by any person or with any respect to any property subject to the jurisdiction of the United States and the Secretary determines.
So that's just anything.
Yeah.
That really does just kind of read like it's a lot of
just
language
anything.
to say anything.
Anything we don't like.
We can investigate anything we don't like for any reason. It's
And
arbitrary.
so now if you should be terrified, it's like, well, wait a minute. I'm an American citizen. I didn't think anything this was going to apply to me. How can I get caught up in this dragnet? Well, you do have to interact with not necessarily a foreign entity, but someone who's been flagged by that previous example there. But how could you be involved in somebody like that? Does it have to be like a contractual thing? Does it have to be a business thing? Well, they give us a checklist.
What counts as transacting or holding a foreign entity? Holding, the term holding means an equity interest, a stock, a security, a share, a partnership interest, an interest in a limited liability company, a membership interest, or any participation, right, or other equivalent, however designated, and of any character, and includes without limitation any security convertible into an ownership interest and right, warrant, or option to acquire ownership interests.
So would that last part, right before the last part, it's like, I've got a participation right in an app that I got on the App Store. Would that apply?
It says any participation of any character.
Does that
sounds
count like open source too? Like if you
I'm
contribute
sure.
to...
Absolutely, it could, yeah.
You know, what if you're the open source maintainer of, say, Nginx, and Nginx is developed in Russia? Would this apply to you?
Or what about the curl guy? The curl guy's in Russia. He can't get curl on certain sites because he's in Russia. So now if I fork curl, am I now part of this?
That sounds like a transaction.
Or any participation. Any participation is so broad that
You popped into the Discord server just to read about it, and now you've been flagged by the Secretary of Commerce.
Now, the craziest thing about this, though, if you're thinking like, well, now I just can't have any participation with anybody. I'm going to go live in the woods. Well, you're not safe because this is retroactive, but not just retroactive.
Does it affect past transaction? Yes, but also the future? Timing. The term covered transaction includes a current, past, or potential future transaction.
Yeah.
How do you identify all potential future transactions?
You spy on literally everything, right?
You look at the data, the marketing data, and you're like, well, they're most likely to buy this thing in the future.
And a great example of this is Iran, for example, and Russia. We know a lot of the ransomware comes from there.
Yeah.
You ever paid a ransomware?
Yeah.
Well, guess what? You've had a past transaction with a flagged entity. So now you check a ton of these boxes at that point.
And I can tell you, the State Department will totally call you if you pay the ransomware to an Iranian-linked organization already, even before this.
And here's one that some people have already sort of extrapolated into the world of VPNs, right? Now, again, we're not constitutional lawyers or anything, but it certainly
Very important
sounds
to
like
keep that in mind.
when you're talking about interacting with a targeted entity that could pull you into this dragnet, what do you have to satisfy?
No person may cause or aid, abet, counsel, command, induce, procure, permit, or approve the doing of any act prohibited by, or the omission of any act required by any regulation, order, direction, mitigation measure, prohibition, or other authorization or directive issued under this act.
So if you use a VPN to access TikTok, this is what they're talking about. When they say, "Oh, you can't use a VPN," well, what's the penalty? How much suffering are you going to exact for using a VPN because you're TikTok curious? It's $250,000 or 20 years just for using a VPN. That's not all that applies to. Not just VPN, not just accessing TikTok. What about other stuff?
So one of the recent cases we've seen was the election meme case. Somebody put up a meme trying to tell people who wanted to vote for Hillary Clinton that they could vote in ways that weren't actually valid. So the government decided that was election interference. But with this law in place, the bar would be much lower. They wouldn't even have to go to trial.
You have to see those memes.
And they could apply 20 years in prison for memes.
Is it? I don't know. I don't want to go down that road, but it seems like the memes are a higher bar than some of the other stuff that we've seen, where people would be instructed to fill out their voter card wrong in some places that have been accused of voter suppression. Like the memes, I don't know.
Yeah, it's already bad, and this makes the badness so much easier.
Yeah.
For the bad side. So now we get to the point, like you brought up earlier, like how are we ever going to figure all this out? Well, unprecedented surveillance, and that is how we figure out who is our target. But what surveillances will be allowed? This is actually a cut down list. Again,
Yeah.
I would recommend you go and look at the whole list. It's astonishing.
But also the first one is really disturbing because it's like, wait, what is this? What is this creative interpretation? This doesn't sound like a law. It's just some random directive.
Let me read it. Information and communications technology products or services used by a party to a covered transaction in a sector designated as critical infrastructure in Policy Directive 21.
This is another bill.
Yeah.
What? But that's not even a law. That's just a directive. It's just like, oh, it's like the Google Play Store counts for this because TikTok? What?
Software, hardware, or any other product or service integral to telecommunications products and services, including wireless local area networks, mobile networks, satellite payloads, satellite operations and control, cable access points, wireline access points, core networking systems, long, short, and backhaul networks, or edge computer platforms.
That's the hardware section. We also have a software section.
I would also point out, it's like, why do they need to include computer edge platforms? Because everything else was literally every networking technology they could think of. And then it's like, oh, K covers everything that's not networked.
Yeah, this is literally everything with a transistor.
Yeah.
If you put any points into electronics in your skill tree, it's covered here. The other thing that they cover is all online accounts. So any software, hardware, or any other product or service integral to data hosting or computing service that uses, processes, or retains, or is expected to use, process, or retain sensitive personal data with respect to greater than 1 million persons in the U.S. at any point during the year period preceding the date on which the covered transaction is referred to, the Secretary for review or the Secretary initiates review of the covered transaction, including, so many. Internet hosting services, cloud-based or distributed computing and data storage, machine learning, predictive analytics, data science products and services, including those involving the provision of services to assist a party utilize, manage, or maintain open source software, managed services, content delivery services.
Wow.
Literally everything.
Quite a list. It's pretty much all software, right? I mean, I think
They literally called out open source. Nowhere is safe.
they've got the 1 million thing, but there's also a little bit of a loophole there that's expected to be.
Yeah.
Would you say that the election memes that were endlessly retweeted on Twitter, which definitely were exposed to 1 million people, you might not have intended for that to be exposed to 1 million people, but because you posted it to Twitter, that would then fall under this.
Or even if you didn't post it to Twitter.
Yeah, friend. Say you were posting in a private Discord chat and your friend posted it on their Twitter.
And now,
You're the originator of the meme.
and now both of you
Yeah.
are in
Of
the list.
commerce.
Yeah. That's the group, like any other group, right? Like any kind of group. Well, that's a conspiracy group. I see right here. So once they have established that you are at fault, or they suspect that can be at fault, they can now investigate you. Well, what can they investigate? Much like the list of we just read, it's exhaustive. Once again, this is not all of them. Please go and look at the document yourself. But here's some kind of greatest hits.
Wireless local area networks, cable access points, core networking systems, internet hosting services, cloud-based or distributed computing and data storage. And this is a long one. Machine learning, predictive analytics, and data science products and services, including those involving the provision of services to assist a party utilize, manage, or maintain open source software. Internet or network-enabled sensors, webcams, endpoint surveillance or monitoring devices, modems, home networking devices if greater than 1 million units have been sold to persons in the United States at any point during the year or period preceding the data on which the covered transaction is referred to the secretary.
So everything in your house.
Again, yeah.
They're going to come with their windbreakers and they're going to take everything so that they can investigate it. And what can they then do with those devices or your online accounts or the things that you own? Well, they're going to give us a checklist of that as well.
Inspect, search, detain, seize, or impose temporary denial orders with respect to terms in any form or conveyances on which it is believed that there are items that have been, are being, or about to be imported into the United States in violation of this act or any other applicable federal law.
Oh, Tim Cook loves that one.
Require, inspect, and obtain books, records, and any other information from any person subject to the provisions of this act or other applicable federal law.
So unlimited subpoena power.
Administer oaths or affirmations and by subpoena require any person to appear and testify to appear and produce books, records, or other writings, or both.
And so let's say that you are a foreign company and you have been called to, maybe you have a place in the U.S. like TikTok, you know, or a business in the U.S. You get called to give up all these things and you say, but wait a minute, I have trade secrets. How many times has Google done that?
Yeah.
And you say, no, I'm not going to show you my books. I don't have to do that. They say, yeah, you do.
Any failure to obey such order of the court may be punished by such court as contempt thereof.
This is the least unreasonable thing in this whole thing because, you know, if Google doesn't comply with Congress, you know, what happens? Nothing.
Yeah.
But this is so overbroad, it's just bananas.
It's not going to be used. I mean, it probably will be used to some of the big corporations a little bit, but it'll probably punish us ultimately.
Well, this is an impossible hill. Like, so for corporations, okay, but because of the way this is written, it'll also apply to individuals. And maybe they're going for, you know, like you get the individual spy that's operating or whatever. But as we've seen, they'll drive a truck through the definitions. Look at the Patriot Act. It's like, oh, there's a secret interpretation of this. That's a phrase that was uttered in testimony before Congress. And it's just like a secret interpretation of what the law says. That's just...
Can you talk about that? Only if you know the secret handshake.
And if you look at people who are trying to calm this down now that we've seen it, you know, it's like, no, it's not about that. It's about this other thing. Yeah, you might be telling us it's about that other thing, but the language of the law allows you to do whatever you want with it. And let's say that maybe you do have the best interest in mind, which is certainly not true. Is the next administration going to do that?
No.
Yeah.
They get to keep this power. We're still using the Patriot Act, right? So not only could you get the, was it like $250,000, maybe $1 million in some cases, and 20 years in prison? No, that's not enough. They have a fun new way to punish any sort of people that fall afoul of this. They're just going to take basically everything.
Civil forfeiture is in there. I can't believe civil forfeiture is in there. So again, you don't need civil forfeiture when you're going after a corporation. You only need that for an individual that can defend themselves.
There's also just regular forfeiture.
Yeah, not just
in
civil,
general.
also criminal. They have both civil and criminal. They both do basically the same thing.
Well,
But,
except the context. Civil forfeiture is like they're going to seize whatever money I've got to defend myself.
not just money. They have some
Assets.
pretty
man.
much everything. If you read the in general there,
Any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, used or intended to...
cryptocurrency.
Yeah. Used or intended to be used in any manner to commit or facilitate a violation or attempted violation described in paragraph 1 shall be subject to forfeiture in the United States.
Yeah, but the attempted violation in paragraph 1 could be, I would like to be able to run my old Nintendo games that I bought and paid for on my computer because the flash is wearing out.
Also, proceeds, which means that any profit that you make, they can grab that as well. And they kind of put the same thing on criminal forfeiture. But once again, we get this crazy little piece of language that opens it up so much there in Part I.
Any property, real or personal, tangible or intangible, used or intended to be used in any manner to commit or facilitate the violation or attempted violation of paragraph 1.
So while they're looking through pretty much everything that you own, all those devices we talked about earlier, if they decide that you have an intention to do something they don't like, the forfeiture can still apply to that. That's insane.
Yeah.
Now,
I like to think that that would be difficult to prove, but if you're a lawyer and your only thing is to just do this all day.
well, plus, I mean, a lot of the stuff's going to be in secret.
Yeah.
So you're not going to get your chance to disprove it until the case is pretty much already set. Now, the thing about it is, who is actually going to go after this, right? Like, we don't have a part of the government to do this. Do we use the FBI? Do we use
The Space Force?
I don't know. NSA, who do we use for this? Well, good news. We don't need to do that because we'll have a new force and we'll be able to hire them.
Appointment of candidates. To expedite the ability of the Secretary to implement this act, the Secretary may appoint, without regard to the provisions of Section 3309 through 3318 of Title V, United States Code, candidates directly to positions in the competitive service as assigned in Section 212 of that title.
I don't know what 3309 or 3318 is, but I suspect this means that they get to hire as many as they want with
Candidate.
no regard to anything.
Fun times.
We just need lots of people to look at all your stuff, so we will hire indefinitely.
Well, surely to goodness, we will have the ability to have some sort of oversight over this new apparatus.
You would think, as this language, as broad as it is, somebody would be paying attention here, right? Like, we could get some citizen activists to create a website to track all of this stuff. Well, you'd be so wrong about that.
Any information submitted to the federal government by a party to a covered transaction in accordance with this act, as well as any information the federal government may create relating to the review of the covered transaction, is exempt from disclosure under Section 552 of Title V, United States Code, commonly referred to as the Freedom of Information Act.
So you can't submit a FOIA request to this, and it's like, hey, there was some weirdness in this group. Can I know what's going on? No, you're not allowed to
Exempt.
know.
Ever. This will be secret forever, basically. And finally, in the very end of this document, we have the budget. Now, obviously, budget's a big concern right now.
Yeah.
Money's a bit of an issue. We don't have a lot of extra money to throw around in the government. So how much are we going to earmark for this horrible program?
These are authorized to be appropriated such sums as may be necessary to carry out the act.
That's all they say about the budget. Basically, whatever we want.
This is not good.
Anyway, so I read a lot of that, and I didn't say the word TikTok or ByteDance once.
It didn't really sound much like anti-TikTok legislation, did it?
It didn't really even refer to things like just how any social media handles our privacy.
Why would we need something this sweeping when we could have a law that simply says something like, don't appropriate data, don't exceed your authorized access as an application to spy on someone's location or make someone aware that this is what it is. It's like, don't install this application.
Because that would apply to all the social media networks.
Including the ones based in the US,
I
like
mean-
Facebook, Twitter, etc.
I would be fine if you had like smoking is like Surgeon General's warning, this thing causes cancer. If Facebook had a similar warning, then that's fine.
Yeah, but Facebook contributes a lot to the people that wrote this.
Well, I mean, Philip Morris did too for the smoking causes cancer, but ultimately it didn't work in the end.
I think the sad answer is that the people in charge aren't actually that worried about TikTok.
Yeah.
No.
They see an opportunity here, and oh boy, did they go big in terms of how they're going to take advantage of it.
Are you scared enough? Well, let us pass this and then it'll fix it. And it doesn't fix anything.
You'd think that if they had wanted something that was maybe more effective, they would have looked at Europe and the GDPR, but
I don't
No.
I don't even know that the GDPR is really all that effective. The most effective thing is educating people. Like when your mom wants to install something, just like, well, I don't know if we should install this.
And I'd love to tell you to get out there and get your voice heard and we can defeat this. I don't have a lot of hope for that. But you should be armed with the knowledge and you should arm other people if possible. So please tell other people about the horror that this is. And When they tell you that you're a crazy conspiracy theorist, here's the text.
It's like the copper lobby saying that we should not import PEX because it's wildly dangerous and it'll cause people's houses to flood because they want you to use copper pipes, or something about the food industry telling us that the worst sorts of food is really good for us and that fat is the enemy and sugar's fine.
Yeah, it's basically some of the worst purveyors of disinformation telling us that they're going to save us from disinformation. And all we have to give them is unlimited power.
It's like Senator Palpatine what's going on?
Anyway, now that you've had your little dose of dystopia, we'll see you guys then. Bye!